In Shreveport, they're trying to remember the roots of country music. In New Orleans, it's jazz. And bookmarks in the history of jazz music are disappearing fast. In this case, though, the National Park Service may be able to help.
Mine was so bad. They got a whole lot of people that come here, they're musicians, a whole lot of them are musicians coming here. And they know what you're doing. And they know what it's worth. You know what I mean? The value of what you're doing. They enjoy it. They come in here and they can't talk to you, but they come maybe to Germany or Italy or some of them places. China, Japan. And they're musicians.
In a cozy 200-year-old parlor, Percy and Willie Humphrey quietly prepared for another evening of jazz. This evening it was Percy's birthday, his 89th birthday. This night Willie was 93. The Humphrey brothers have headlined here at Preservation Hall for more than 30 years, and they were preparing to enter the recording studio to make yet another album.
Some person want to record my brother and I just a couple of days ago.
Will you do it?
Yeah, for money. The real kind of money. I don't mean for peanuts.
Late arriving jazz fans stumble through the dark room to find all the seats have been taken. Half of the Humphreys visitors tonight are from overseas. From France, where American jazz is sacred. From Germany, where authentic bluesmen play sold-out soccer stadiums. And from Japan, where jazz musicians are as famous as rock stars.
Those people buy records, always buy records, and they pay them to listen to them. And when they come to the States, that's what they want to hear.
Some of them, like you take people that live in the States here, they hear the music, the songs we play, kind of ties them, they remember that. And they sing them, can sing them. Some of the fellows that does singing here, they get them to sing with them, you know, with the people, you know, that's how they enjoy themselves.
The Crescent City Joymakers are one of a handful of old-line jazz bands left in New Orleans who still play a regular gig in the French Quarter. Wednesdays and Saturdays, 7 half-hour sets a night. There's no bathroom and no bar. Just the music in a faded chamber revered as center stage for the soul of jazz. Of course, it's a bit morbid to mention, but practically you can't help wonder, what will happen to the music when the musicians pass on? The history of jazz music is filled with artists who never committed their talent to vinyl. Maybe that's a small part of the fascination these visitors have with hearing hot jazz played in person, before it's too late. For the first half of this century, every city was filled with bands of all types. Brass bands playing patriotic music in parades. Snazzy uniforms were the envy of every kid who wanted to be noticed. With some determination, you could make it into the groups who played for the benevolent societies. Black clubs and white clubs within earshot of each other. Before segregation and bigotry became really fashionable, New Orleans was a lot more ethnically mixed, and the musical styles and innovations got all jumbled up in what would later be called jazz bands. For the church social, you hired a band. Family reunions and political rallies hired the bands too. Remember, these were the days before television, before rock and roll. Even by the 1930s, a radio was the size of a refrigerator. The musicians made names for themselves. Georgia Tom Dorsey, Louis Dumaine, the Louisiana Shakers, the Mobile Strugglers, Jelly Roll Martin, and Joe King Oliver. But only die-hard jazz fans remember Kid Ory or the Superior Orchestra. Who but the serious collector has ever heard them play on a record? Hardly anyone. That saddens Don Marquis, a self-described jazz nut and curator of the State Museum's jazz exhibit.
And this map sort of illustrates that this is where we are now, the French Quarter. This is where the Mint is. Back behind the quarter is the Treme area. That's where the Creoles lived. Over in here was Storyville, which was the red light district. Out here at the end of the streetcar line is Carrollton. There's a lot of dairy farms out there. People would travel out in the streetcars, and there were a number of parks and baseball parks. Politicians gave a speech, they had a band. Lay a cornerstone, you have a band. It was just part of the city.
So there were a lot more bands around to hear each other and to...
Well, it was all over town, and every ethnic group prided themselves in having brass bands. And people would take the Smoky Mary train, which went without Elysian Field this way, and have picnics, family gatherings on weekends. That was a way to cool off, and everybody had music. If it was a little family group, a guitar, banjo player. If it was a fraternal group or a club, there would be a full band, and everybody was in earshot of each other. That's where a lot of the early music ideas got exchanged, because everybody could hear what everybody else was doing.
All over town, all types of music getting all mixed up, then spit out of a horn as jazz in all those neighborhoods. This is the Treme, and if any place is the cradle of modern jazz, it's this corner of Old New Orleans. Now, folks in Chicago or even Memphis may take issue with that, but how about hearing it from some of the jazzmen themselves, those folks who carried that crazy hybrid music throughout the rest of the nation? Jazzmen like Sidney Bechet. There was this club, Sidney says, that we played at, the 25 Club. That was about 1912, and all the time we played there, people were talking about Freddie Kephart. Freddie had left New Orleans with his band and was traveling all over the country playing towns on the Orpheum Circuit. It seems like everyone along the circuit was coming up to Freddie to ask about this ragtime. Where did it come from? And back at the 25, friends of Freddie's kept coming around and showing the clippings, wanting to know what it was all about. It was a new thing back then.
It left from here and went to Chicago.
While many of the most talented musicians stayed home. In the Treme, this was the house of trombone great Jim Robinson. Guess what this work crew was installing next door the very day we came to see it? A nicely poured, brand new concrete parking lot. Eunice, Louisiana. Here they have a National Park Service interpretive center. That means that besides saving old buildings, the Department of the Interior provides Cajun cooking demonstrations, whip-making shows, and Indian basket weaving presentations. Since it opened 3 years ago, the center has enjoyed ever higher numbers of visitors. And they're the more mature visitors, too, the ones who spend money. Every bit of demographic information from tourism officials says the median age of visitors to Louisiana is getting higher. Older people have money to spend on vacations to expensive cities like New Orleans. Already the French Quarter is turning to cleaner, family-style entertainment, the Aquarium of the Americas, the whole riverfront, and the whole nostalgia thing. It used to be Bourbon Street catered exclusively to the lascivious teen and 20-something crowd.
what the Park Service would like to do would be to open some kind of cultural interpretation center for the topic of jazz, talking about the history and the roots of jazz in New Orleans. They think that that may bring in the kind of tourists that we're likely to get over the next decade or so, and at that point they'll have something mature and intelligent to see.
The wheels have begun to turn in Washington to help preserve the less concrete landmarks of lost Louisiana. They are as important as any historic site. The intangible joy that is jazz music has a chance now to live on. Willie Humphrey died in 1994. One more legend we will keep now as a treasured memory.